11.8 million registered boats on American waterways. That's the official number. And that doesn't count the nearly 4 million unregistered vessels the Coast Guard estimates are out there too. 15 million boats on lakes that haven't gotten 1 square foot bigger since the day they were built. Think about that for a second. The lake you grew up fishing, the one your dad took you to when you were 10 years old, back when you could idle out of the ramp at 6 in the morning and not see another soul for 2 hours, that lake has more traffic on it right now than some state highways. And nobody, not your state wildlife agency, not your local government, not the tourism board that's been advertising that lake to every person with a credit card in a weekend, nobody is doing a single meaningful thing to manage the chaos. 556 people died in recreational boating incidents in 2024. Over 2,000 more were injured. $88 million in property damage. And here's the number that should really bother you. According to a study the Coast Guard itself cites, up to 93% of non-fatal boating injuries are never even reported. 93%. That means the real number of people getting hurt out there is something nobody actually wants to calculate. Because if they did, they'd have to do something about it. But they won't. Because the system that's supposed to protect you on the water has decided you're not the customer anymore. You're just in the way. And what's happening right now on public lakes across this country isn't a boat ramp inconvenience. It's not a holiday weekend headache. It's a full-blown system failure. Too many boats, zero meaningful enforcement, and a political structure that has decided tourism dollars matter more than the fishery, more than your safety, and more than the sport you've spent a lifetime building around. Here's the thing nobody in charge wants to say out loud. The serious angler, the guy who buys a license every year, maintains a boat, follows the rules, respects the resource. That guy is being pushed off the water so someone else can make money off the lake he paid to use. And I'm going to walk you through exactly how it happened. Here's how this played out. After 2020, recreational boating in this country exploded. People were locked down, looking for anything to do outside, and manufacturers could not build boats fast enough. Dealers had waiting lists. Marinas were packed. Every lake in America suddenly had a whole new population of users who had never backed a trailer down a ramp before in their lives. Now here's what should have happened. State agencies should have looked at the surge and said, okay, we need more marine patrol. We need updated capacity studies on our most popular lakes. We need to revisit horsepower restrictions, wake zones, and speed limits. We need to actually enforce the laws we already have on the books. That's what should have happened. Here's what actually happened. Nothing. Registrations kept climbing. In 2024, state-registered recreational vessels hit 11.6 million, a 1% increase over the year before. And that's only the boats with numbers on them. Florida alone has over 1 million registered vessels, and the state's own Wildlife Commission estimates there are nearly 1 million more unregistered boats actively in use. Texas has 560,000 registered and another 359,000 unregistered. Those are staggering numbers, and every single one of those boats needs to go somewhere. So they go to the same lakes you fish, the same ramps, the same coves, the same flats. And what did the state agencies do with this information? Well, in Georgia, for example, they entered the 2024 summer season with fewer game wardens than they had in the year 2000. Georgia had 250 wardens 24 years ago. By 2024, budget cuts had dropped that number as low as 181 before it clawed back to around 234. The state's own DNR law enforcement director said it publicly. They're still not up to where they were a quarter century ago. Meanwhile, Georgia's population has grown by over 2 million people since then. Minnesota had 21 vacant conservation officer positions out of 155 patrol areas. Wisconsin's Conservation Congress chairman said it plainly. People who want to break the rules know which stations are empty. They know the odds of seeing a warden are slim because regular patrols just aren't happening. So you've got more boats than ever, fewer officers than a generation ago, and a population of new boaters who, according to the Coast Guard's own data, are largely untrained. 69% of boating fatalities in 2024 occurred on vessels where the operator had received no formal boating safety instruction. None. And alcohol remained the leading known contributing factor in fatal boating accidents, accounting for 92 deaths, 20% of all fatalities on the water. You combine those numbers, and what you get is a lake that doesn't feel like a public resource anymore. It feels like a theme park with no rules. And that brings us to the part that made me the angriest. Let me tell you what this looks like on the water. Because the statistics are one thing, living it is another. You're a guy in your 50s or 60s. You've been fishing since you could hold a rod. You own a boat. Maybe it's 15 years old, maybe 20. It's paid for. You keep it maintained. You buy your license every single year. You follow slot limits. You release fish. You respect the no-wake zones. You're out there at 5:30 in the morning because you love it and because that's when the bite is on. By 9 o'clock, here's what happens. A wake boat comes through your cove throwing 4-foot rollers with a ballast tank that pushes prop wash down nearly 30 feet, churning up sediment, disturbing fish beds, ripping out vegetation. 85 organizations in Wisconsin alone have banded together to fight this. They formed a coalition called Lakes at Stake. One longtime fisherman on a small Wisconsin lake said the wake boats make the water so cloudy it settles over the fish beds, kills the weeds, and destroys the habitat the bass depend on. Another resident spent thousands of dollars on boulders just to stop the erosion from eating his shoreline. That's not a complaint about waves, that's habitat destruction on a public waterway. Then a rental pontoon shows up. Nobody on it has any training. The operator barely knows port from starboard. They anchor on the point you've been working all morning. Somebody cranks a speaker. Somebody opens a cooler. By noon, that cove is a floating frat party. And you, the guy who paid for a license, who follows every rule, who actually contributes to the conservation of that fishery through excise taxes on your tackle and fuel, you pack up and leave. You go home. Because the lake isn't yours anymore. It belongs to whoever showed up with the biggest speakers and the least amount of respect. And look, I'm not saying people shouldn't enjoy the water. That's not the point. The point is there's supposed to be a system. There are supposed to be rules and people who enforce them. But there isn't. Not in any meaningful way. Georgia had 20 boating fatalities in 2024. That's double what it was in 2020. Lake Lanier alone has averaged 10 drownings a year for 70 years. During one 4th of July weekend, 2 people drowned in the state, and there were 27 boating under the influence cases reported, 15 of them on Lake Lanier in a single weekend. That's not recreation. That's a crisis being marketed as a good time. And what does the angler do? The guy who's been doing this for 40 years? He starts going less. He fishes during the week if he can, which means burning vacation days. He drives farther to find water that hasn't been overrun yet. He spends more money on gas. He puts more hours into what used to be a simple Saturday morning on the lake. And eventually, some of these guys just quit. The data backs it up. The Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation reported that in 2024, fishing lost 16.6 million participants to churn. That's a 23% dropout rate. 5 years ago, the churn rate was 18%. A decade ago, it was 12%. And the most frequent anglers, the guys who fish once a month or more, have been declining steadily since 2007. In 2014, 37% of anglers fished at least monthly. By 2024, that number dropped to 32%. The dedicated guys are leaving. And when you ask people why they stopped fishing, one of the top obstacles cited was overcrowding at fishing spots. That's not speculation. That came straight from the survey data. And here's what really burns me. These are the people who fund the system. The sport fishing community contributes $2 billion a year to conservation through excise taxes, license sales, and charitable donations. The average angler spends $1,500 a year on the sport. These are not casual participants. These are the backbone of freshwater fishery management in this country. And they're being run off the very waters their money is supposed to protect. So if the guys who actually fund the fishery are getting pushed out, who's benefiting? Let's follow the money. The recreational boating industry generates $32.4 billion in economic impact annually. That's bigger than RVing, bigger than motorcycling, bigger than hunting and snow sports. And that number doesn't care whether the person spending money on the lake knows how to drive a boat, respects a no-wake zone, or has ever bought a fishing license in their life. All it cares about is volume. Tourism boards know this. Local governments know this. That's why your lake gets promoted on social media, on tourism websites, on state travel guides. More visitors mean more hotel nights, more restaurant tabs, more gas station fill-ups. A busy lake is an economic engine. A quiet lake is a missed opportunity. And that's the conflict nobody wants to talk about. The State Wildlife Agency's job is to manage the fishery and enforce the law. But the state's economic development arm wants more people on that lake, not fewer. The Tourism Board wants boat rental companies running at full capacity. The local Chamber of Commerce wants every Airbnb on the waterfront booked through September. These goals are directly at odds with conservation and safety. And when those goals collide, guess which one wins? Every single time, the money wins. Look at the wake boat industry. These boats cost $100,000 or more. They're a massive revenue driver for marine manufacturers. And the boating industry funded its own study, claiming wake boats only need to be 200 feet from shore and in 10 feet of water to prevent ecological damage. Meanwhile, the University of Minnesota conducted an independent study, and communities across the state are now pushing for 500 feet and 20 feet of depth as minimums. Vermont passed new wake boat rules in 2024. Minnesota approved its first individual lake restriction on wake surfing. Wisconsin has seen over 75 municipalities pass local ordinances trying to regulate these boats, more than a 50% increase since 2024 alone. And still, there's no statewide restriction in most states. Because the industry lobby is powerful, because the boats are expensive, because the people buying them have money, and because the people being harmed, the anglers, the kayakers, the dock owners watching their shoreline erode, don't have a lobby that writes checks. So the state says, we'll do a study, and the study takes 2 years. And then they say, we'll propose a bill, and the bill dies in committee because the pushback is too loud. And meanwhile, the lakes keep getting hammered. Once you see how this incentive structure works, you can't unsee it. The state collects your license fee and your excise tax and uses that money to manage a fishery. Then the tourism arm of that same state invites millions of people onto that fishery with no training, no enforcement, and no meaningful regulation. And when the fishery degrades and the experience deteriorates and the anglers start leaving, they launch a recruitment campaign to bring in new anglers, instead of fixing the problem that drove the old ones away. It's a perfect loop, and you're the one paying for it. I've been on the water a long time, long enough to remember when a Saturday morning on the lake didn't feel like a survival exercise, long enough to remember when you could fish a public reservoir without dodging rental boats and wake surfers and party barges anchored on your best spot, and long enough to see where this is all heading if nobody steps up. Here's the future nobody wants to admit is coming. The dedicated anglers, the older guys, the lifers, the ones who actually built this sport from the ground up, they leave first. They age out. They get frustrated. They stop buying licenses. And when they go, the conservation funding they provided goes with them. $2 billion a year doesn't replace itself. Then the fisheries start showing it. Because the people who replace those anglers on the water aren't practicing catch and release. They aren't respecting slot limits. They aren't reporting habitat damage. They're just there for the afternoon. And without wardens to enforce the rules, because the states can't staff the positions they already have, the resource gets used up without anyone noticing until it's too late. Then the lake that used to hold 8-pound largemouth becomes a lake that holds 2-pound spots. The weed beds get churned out by wake boats. The spawning flats get silted over. The water clarity drops. And the tourism board keeps advertising it as a destination anyway. Because by then it's not about the fishing. It's about the lake as a product, a backdrop for somebody's social media post. You and I both know what a good fishery looks like. It looks like clean water, healthy habitat, responsible management, and people on the water who respect it. Every single one of those things is under pressure right now, and the people in charge of protecting them have decided that access without accountability is good enough. It's not. If we keep pretending that more boats on the water is the same thing as a healthy lake, we're going to lose something that took generations to build. Not the lake itself, they can't drain it, but the quality of it, the fishery, the experience, the thing that made you fall in love with this in the first place. Every state in this country needs to answer one question. Who is the lake for? Is it a public resource managed for long-term health and fair use? Or is it an economic asset to be maxed out until there's nothing left worth protecting? Because right now the answer is obvious, and the people who've given the most to this sport are the ones paying the price. That's where we are. That's the truth nobody else is going to tell you.